She doesn't even speak English. How can we negotiate with someone like that? The cruel words sliced through the elegant Manhattan ballroom like a blade through silk. Crystal glasses clinked against bone china, while laughter echoed off marble walls, creating a symphony of privilege and power. At the center of it all sat Ayako Takahashi, motionless as carved jade. The Japanese millionaire's face remained serene, her hands folded gracefully in her lap. To everyone around her, she was nothing more than a beautiful statue, a silent decoration in their world of deals and dominance. They had no idea she understood every poisonous word. The Regency Hotel's crown room embodied everything money could buy and power could command. 30-foot ceilings soared above guests like cathedral spires, while Austrian crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across mahogany-paneled walls. Each table setting cost more than most monthly salaries. Baccarat crystal that sang when touched, sterling silver that gleamed like moonlight, bone china so delicate it seemed translucent. American CEOs prowled the room in custom Armani tuxedos, their Patek Philippe watches catching light as they gestured expansively about quarterly earnings and market dominance. European investors adjusted diamond-studded cufflinks while swirling 30-year-old Bordeaux in glasses worth small fortunes. The air itself seemed thick with ambition, heavy with the scent of expensive cologne and the electricity of billion-dollar conversations. Italian leather chairs worth more than cars surrounded tables draped in Irish linen. Servers glided between them carrying silver platters laden with delicacies, flown in from around the world. Ossetra caviar, Wagyu beef, truffles from Perigord. This was capitalism's temple, where handshakes moved mountains and casual words shifted stock prices. Against this backdrop of Western excess, Ayako appeared like a work of art in a gallery of commerce. Her modernized kimono, crafted from midnight silk with threads of platinum woven through cherry blossom patterns, whispered of ancient elegance and timeless grace. Her obsidian hair was arranged in a perfect chignon, secured with a hairpin that had belonged to her grandmother, simple platinum that held more history than all the new money surrounding her. But what struck observers wasn't her obvious wealth or refined beauty, it was her absolute stillness. While others gesticulated wildly, their voices competing for attention and dominance, she simply existed, present but apart, like a mountain peak rising above storm clouds. 22-year-old Chloe Martinez moved through this world of titans like a shadow given form. Her simple black and white uniform marked her as invisible to most guests, just another servant in their kingdom of plenty. But her dark eyes, inherited from a grandmother who had crossed oceans with nothing but dreams, kept returning to the solitary figure at table 7. Something about Ayako's isolation stirred memories Chloe had tried to forget. Afternoons spent translating for her Japanese grandmother, watching strangers dismiss a woman of profound wisdom simply because her English carried the music of another culture. The parallel was too painful to ignore, too familiar to dismiss. The cultural divide felt as vast as the Pacific Ocean. Here, in this monument to American enterprise, Ayako seemed as foreign as cherry blossoms blooming in a desert. The other guests spoke around her, about her, but never to her, as if she were a beautiful problem to be solved rather than a human being to be acknowledged. The room pulsed with the rhythm of capitalism, deals being struck, partnerships being forged, futures being traded like commodities. But in the center of it all sat one woman who had built an empire in silence, waiting for someone to prove they deserved to hear her voice. Ayako Takahashi had revolutionized biotechnology with nothing but brilliance and determination. Her Tokyo laboratories held 43 patents that could transform cancer treatment, making her worth $2 billion and one of the most sought-after partners in pharmaceutical development. Yet tonight, surrounded by supposed peers, she might as well have been invisible. The irony was lost on no one except those who mattered most. This woman had delivered keynote speeches at Harvard Medical School, published groundbreaking research in Nature and Science, and built a company that employed thousands across 3 continents. But because she chose not to engage in their crude theater of dominance, they assumed she couldn't. Richard Hall circled her like a predator sensing weakness. The American pharmaceutical CEO's silver hair gleamed under crystal chandeliers, his practiced smile sharp enough to cut glass and twice as dangerous. His company desperately needed Ayako's patents, breakthrough research that could generate hundreds of billions in revenue. But he saw opportunity in what he mistook for vulnerability. To Richard, Ayako represented the perfect target, brilliant enough to be valuable, foreign enough to be exploitable. His pharmaceutical empire had been built on acquiring smaller companies and innovative patents, often through tactics that skirted the edges of ethical business practice. Tonight's dinner was meant to be his masterpiece, a cultural conquest disguised as international cooperation. "Look at her sitting there," he murmured to his lieutenant, Thomas Wright, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Brilliant in her laboratory, I'm sure, but business requires more than scientific genius. It requires communication, negotiation, the ability to think on your feet in English." Margaret Stone, the razor-sharp head of Sterling Investment Group, leaned back in her chair with predatory grace. Her laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "It's almost tragic, really. All that intelligence locked away behind a language barrier. She probably understands every third word we're saying." James Morrison, another pharmaceutical executive hungry for Ayako's innovations, joined the chorus of casual cruelty. "I heard she needs translators for board meetings. Imagine trying to run a biotech company when you can't even order coffee in English." Their laughter rippled across nearby tables, drawing knowing smiles from others who felt safe in their linguistic superiority. They treated Ayako like an exotic artifact, beautiful, valuable, but ultimately powerless in their world of fast-talking deal-makers in aggressive negotiations. From her position near the wine station, Chloe's hands clenched around the crystal carafe she'd been holding. She'd grown up as her grandmother's voice in a world that refused to listen, translating not just words but dignity itself. Watching Ayako endure the same casual dismissal stirred something fierce and protective in her chest. But Chloe also saw what the business titans missed. Ayako's apparent passivity wasn't confusion or intimidation, it was calculation. The Japanese millionaire's dark eyes tracked every speaker, cataloging each dismissive comment, each arrogant assumption. Behind her serene expression lay the mind that had revolutionized regenerative medicine, and it was working overtime. The other guests continued their performance, speaking about Ayako as if she were a beautiful problem to be solved, rather than a person to be respected. They discussed her patents like treasures to be plundered, her company like territory to be conquered, her silence like weakness to be exploited. Richard's confidence grew with each passing moment. He'd structured tonight's dinner specifically to isolate Ayako, surrounding her with English-speaking executives who would reinforce his narrative of Western superiority. The contract in his briefcase was a work of legal artistry, buried clauses and subtle language that would strip her of control while leaving her responsible for all costs. But as Chloe watched from the shadows, she began to understand something the powerful men had missed entirely. Ayako wasn't trapped by language barriers. She was gathering intelligence. Every insult, every assumption, every moment of disrespect was being filed away by a mind that had outmaneuvered competitors across 3 continents. The stage was set for a reckoning that none of them saw coming. Richard struck with the precision of a cobra, his voice carrying the false warmth of a funeral director. "Miss Takahashi, I think it's time we discuss the partnership opportunity." He gestured to his assistant, who placed a leather portfolio before Ayako with theatrical ceremony. "This represents the future of biomedical innovation. Your research combined with our global distribution network." The contract itself was Richard's masterpiece of exploitation. Buried beneath layers of legal jargon lay clauses that would strip Ayako of majority control while saddling her with all research and development costs. To someone struggling with English, it might appear generous. To Richard, it was the perfect trap disguised as opportunity. "Sign here, and we'll handle all the complicated business aspects," Richard continued, his Mont Blanc pen clicking against the marble table like a countdown timer. "This is the best offer you'll receive. Very generous terms for someone in your unique position." His tone dripped with condescension, the sort reserved for children and those deemed intellectually inferior. Around the table, his associates nodded approvingly, their expressions mixing greed with barely concealed amusement. Ayako studied the documents with maddening calm, her manicured fingers tracing lines of text that would determine the fate of her life's work. The silence stretched like a held breath, broken only by the soft percussion of crystal against china and the whispered conversations of distant tables. Does she even understand what she's looking at? Margaret's stage whisper carried across 3 tables, drawing chuckles from nearby executives. Probably waiting for someone to draw her pictures, added James Morrison, earning another round of cruel laughter that rippled through the immediate vicinity like poison spreading through water. Thomas Wright leaned closer to Richard, his voice loud enough to be heard but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. Maybe we should have brought visual aids. I hear they're very effective with certain populations. The cruelty was breathtaking in its casualness, the sort of everyday racism that thrived in boardrooms and country clubs where wealth provided immunity from consequences. These were titans of industry, masters of the universe, reducing a brilliant scientist to a stereotype because it served their financial interests. Chloe's wine carafe trembled in her hands as she witnessed each verbal assault. Her grandmother's voice echoed across the years. Mija, sometimes we must speak when others choose silence, even when it costs us everything. But speaking up would mean losing her job, destroying her future, challenging men who could crush her career with a phone call. The contract lay between them like a loaded weapon, its innocent appearance masking the financial violence it contained. Richard's confidence radiated from every pore. He was minutes away from the acquisition of the century, and all it had cost him was basic human decency. Take your time, he said magnanimously, though his eyes burned with impatience like a child waiting to unwrap presents. I understand this must be overwhelming. American business moves very quickly, and we use very sophisticated language. Ayako's pen hovered over the signature line like a sword above a neck. Around the room, conversations quieted as other diners sensed the approaching climax of Richard's performance. Money was about to change hands. Power was about to shift, and everyone wanted to witness the moment when East bowed to West. But Chloe noticed something the others missed, a subtle tightening around Ayako's eyes, an almost imperceptible straightening of her shoulders. This wasn't submission preparing to surrender. This was a master strategist preparing to strike. The air in the room grew thick with anticipation and casual cruelty, while 2 women, one at the table, one serving it, prepared to change everything with nothing more than truth and courage. The final insult came wrapped in Richard's most patronizing smile. You know what, Ms. Takahashi? Maybe you should go back to Tokyo. Real business requires real communication, and this is America. We speak English here. The words hit the room like a physical blow, their cruelty so casual and complete that even some of the other executives shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke up. None challenged the man who held their financial futures in his manicured hands. That's when Chloe stepped forward. Her voice cut through the poisonous silence like a blade through silk, speaking words that would transform everything. Kono keiyaku wa wana desu. Anata no kenri wa subete ubao tsumori desu. Karera wa anata wo baka ni shite imasu. Every head in the vicinity turned toward the young waitress as if pulled by invisible strings. The Japanese words hung in the air like music in a tomb, beautiful and shocking in their clarity. Richard's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and fury in the span of heartbeats. What the hell did you just say? He demanded, his composure cracking like thin ice under pressure. But the damage was already done. Ayako's head lifted slowly, her dark eyes finding Chloe's, with an expression of profound recognition and gratitude. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of mountains and the strength of tsunamis. She said, Ayako replied in perfect, unaccented English that rang like a bell across the stunned ballroom, that this contract is a trap designed to steal everything I've built, and that you've been treating me like a fool. The silence that followed was deafening. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Wine glasses hung suspended in the air, like time itself had stopped. The great machine of capitalism stuttered to a halt as everyone processed what they just witnessed. Richard's face went through several shades of red as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. Now wait just a minute. You speak English? I speak 7 languages, Mr. Hall. Ayako's voice carried across the room with crystalline clarity. I understood every word you said, every insult, every assumption, Every moment you treated me like a decoration instead of a human being. The room erupted in whispers as the revelation spread like wildfire. Phones appeared as if by magic, recording the aftermath of Richard's humiliation. Margaret Stone's mouth hung open like a landed fish. James Morrison looked like he'd swallowed his own tongue. But Ayako wasn't finished. She stood with fluid grace, her presence suddenly commanding the entire ballroom like a conductor taking the stage. Gone was the silent observer. In her place stood a woman who had built empires with nothing but intelligence, determination, and an unshakable moral compass. The tables had turned and everyone knew it. Ayako rose from her chair with the fluid grace of a dancer, but her presence now commanded the room like a general taking the battlefield. The woman who had been dismissed as a silent ornament revealed herself as the most powerful person in the room, and everyone suddenly understood they'd been watching a masterclass in strategic patience. I have degrees from Tokyo University and Harvard Business School, she continued, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a surgeon's scalpel. I hold 43 patents in biotechnology and have been running international corporations since before you learned to tie your expensive Italian shoes, Mr. Hall. Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, his silver tongue suddenly tied in knots. The confident predator had become cornered prey, and everyone in the room could smell his desperation. For 47 minutes, Ayako continued, her dark eyes sweeping the table like a lighthouse beam revealing hidden dangers. I've listened to you and your colleagues discuss me as if I were a commodity to be traded rather than a person to be respected. I've heard every insult, cataloged every assumption, witnessed every moment of casual racism disguised as business acumen. She picked up the contract with deliberate precision, holding the document that represented Richard's grand scheme between two fingers as if it were contaminated. The legal masterpiece that was supposed to strip her of everything now looked pathetic in her elegant hands. This document is insulting not just to me, but to every legitimate business partnership that has ever existed, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. Did you really believe I couldn't read the clause giving you controlling interest in my company? Or the section making me liable for all development costs while you retain 60% of profits? Or perhaps my favorite, the arbitration clause that requires all disputes to be settled in Texas, using only English-speaking mediators? The paper tore cleanly down the middle, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the cathedral silence. Pieces of Richard's empire-building scheme fluttered to the floor like dying leaves, each fragment representing millions in lost potential. The only misunderstanding here was mine, Ayako declared, her gaze returning to Richard's pale face. I thought I was dining with business professionals. Instead, I find myself among scavengers who mistake silence for weakness and foreign accents for ignorance. Margaret Stone finally found her voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. Ayako, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. The misunderstanding, Ayako interrupted with surgical precision, was believing that respect was still the foundation of legitimate business. Clearly, some of you have forgotten that basic principle. The power dynamic had reversed so completely that several executives actually looked afraid. This wasn't the helpless foreigner they'd planned to exploit. This was a force of nature wrapped in silk and steel, and she was just getting started. Richard attempted one last desperate gambit. Now listen here. You can't just... I can, and I will. Ayako's words cut through his protests like a blade through butter. I'll be partnering with Harrison Pharmaceuticals instead. Unlike some people in this room, they understand that sustainable business success requires mutual respect, cultural sensitivity, and basic human decency. The Harrison Pharmaceuticals executives at Table 12 looked like they'd been struck by lightning. They just witnessed a multi-billion-dollar opportunity fall into their laps through the simple act of treating another human being with dignity, a concept that seemed revolutionary in this room of supposed titans. Thomas Wright's face had gone ashen as he calculated the implications. You can't be serious about what, Mr. Wright? About expecting to be treated like an equal partner rather than a conquered territory? About requiring basic respect in business relationships? About refusing to be exploited because of your assumptions about my language abilities? Ayako gathered her purse with unhurried precision, every movement deliberate and graceful. Gentlemen, you've taught me something valuable tonight. You've shown me exactly who not to do business with. As she prepared to leave, her eyes found Chloe's across the room, and her expression softened with genuine warmth and gratitude. Ayako moved toward the exit with the measured pace of royalty, but before reaching the ballroom doors, she paused beside Chloe. The young woman stood frozen, wine carafe still trembling in her hands, uncertain whether she just saved someone's career or destroyed her own. "What's your name?" "Dear." Ayako's voice carried the warmth that had been absent during her confrontation with Richard. "Chloe Martinez, ma'am." "Chloe Martinez." Ayako smiled, the expression transforming her entire face from warrior to mentor. "You showed more integrity in 30 seconds than this entire table has managed all evening." She reached into her purse, withdrawing a business card that caught the light like polished obsidian. "Would you be interested in a real career? I could use someone who understands that courage and respect transcend cultural boundaries." Chloe's eyes widened as she read the embossed gold lettering. Takahashi Biotechnology International, with Ayako's personal contact information. The card felt like a passport to a completely different life, one where intelligence and integrity mattered more than connections and cruelty. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Excellent. Report to my Tokyo office Monday morning. We'll start you as Director of Cultural Integration. I believe the pharmaceutical industry desperately needs people who understand that diversity is strength, not weakness. Meanwhile, Richard's world was crumbling with each passing second. Other diners had pulled out their phones, recording the aftermath of his humiliation. In the age of social media, his reputation would be destroyed before the evening's dessert course was served. "This is absolutely ridiculous," he blustered, his voice cracking like adolescent going through puberty. "You can't just walk away from this deal." "We had an understanding." "We had nothing," Ayako replied without turning around. "Understanding requires mutual respect, something you've proven incapable of providing." The Harrison Pharmaceuticals team was already approaching, their senior partner extending his hand with genuine respect. "Miss Takahashi, if you have a moment, we'd be honored to discuss a potential partnership based on mutual benefit and cultural appreciation." "I'd be delighted," Ayako replied, her demeanor warming immediately. "I believe in doing business with people who see partners, not conquests." As she walked away, Richard's associates began distancing themselves like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Thomas Wright suddenly found urgent business at another table. Margaret Stone discovered an important phone call that required immediate attention. James Morrison developed a sudden case of selective blindness, staring intently at his phone screen. The man who had orchestrated the evening to demonstrate his dominance now sat alone, his carefully laid plans scattered like the torn contract pieces at his feet. Other diners whispered behind their hands, their phones buzzing with messages that would spread his humiliation across the business world faster than any official announcement. Chloe followed in Ayako's wake, still clutching the business card that represented everything her grandmother had dreamed of when she'd crossed an ocean with nothing but hope. The young woman who had been invisible while serving dinner was about to become the bridge between cultures that Richard had refused to build. In the span of 10 minutes, respect had triumphed over exploitation, courage had overcome fear, and two women had proven that dignity truly had no language barriers. By dawn, the video had gone viral across every social media platform. Someone had recorded Chloe's brave intervention and Ayako's powerful response, and the footage spread like wildfire through a world hungry for stories of justice prevailing over arrogance. The hashtag respect has no language began trending worldwide within hours, with millions sharing their own stories of discrimination and courage. Chloe's face appeared on morning news shows, while Ayako became the subject of business magazine profiles, exploring the intersection of cultural sensitivity and corporate success. Richard's pharmaceutical company stock plummeted 32% in pre-market trading. Emergency board meetings were called before the markets opened. Major investors withdrew funding faster than water flowing downhill. The man who had built his career on exploiting others suddenly found himself facing the consequences of his casual cruelty. By noon, Richard's resignation was announced. His golden parachute had been revoked due to conduct detrimental to company interests. The board cited his behavior as creating significant financial liability and reputational damage that could take years to repair. But the real story was just beginning. Ayako's partnership with Harrison Pharmaceuticals was announced that afternoon, sending their stock soaring 47% and promising breakthrough treatments that could save millions of lives worldwide. The deal, structured as an equal partnership based on mutual respect, became a template for international business relationships. Chloe started her new position the following Monday, becoming the youngest director of cultural integration in pharmaceutical history. Her first project involved establishing international partnership protocols that prioritized respect and understanding over exploitation and dominance. The young woman who had been invisible while serving wine was now featured on the covers of business magazines, her story inspiring countless others to speak up against discrimination and prejudice. Universities invited her to speak about courage in the workplace. Corporate diversity programs used her intervention as a case study in ethical leadership. The Manhattan Hotel quietly removed Richard's company from their preferred client list, understanding that certain behaviors simply couldn't be tolerated in civilized society. Several other prestigious venues followed suit, creating an informal network that excluded those who confused wealth with worth. Within 6 months, the incident had sparked a broader conversation about cultural sensitivity in international business. Companies began requiring cultural competency training for executives. Partnership agreements started including respect clauses. The casual racism that had thrived in boardrooms and country clubs suddenly carried real financial consequences. Richard himself disappeared from public view, his fall from grace so complete that former allies crossed streets to avoid him. His name became synonymous with everything wrong with American business culture, a cautionary tale told in MBA programs worldwide. But perhaps most importantly, Ayako and Chloe's partnership flourished. Their Tokyo laboratory announced breakthrough cancer treatments that had been delayed for years due to Richard's predatory practices. Lives were saved because two women had chosen courage over compliance, respect over profit. One moment of moral courage had created ripples that changed an entire industry. 6 months later, Chloe stood in Ayako's state-of-the-art Tokyo laboratory, watching scientists work on treatments that would revolutionize cancer care. The partnership between cultures, built on mutual respect rather than exploitation, had exceeded every projection and transformed both their lives. "Do you ever regret speaking up?" Ayako asked during a quiet moment between meetings. Chloe smiled, thinking of her grandmother, who had taught her that dignity knew no language barriers. Sometimes we have to risk everything to become who we're meant to be. The lesson had resonated far beyond that Manhattan hotel ballroom. Business schools now taught the Takahashi principle, that sustainable success requires treating partners as equals, regardless of cultural differences. The incident had sparked international conversations about respect, dignity, and the true foundations of ethical business. Richard's downfall became a cautionary tale, proof that arrogance and prejudice were luxuries no one could afford in an interconnected world. But the real power came from an unexpected source, a young waitress who reminded everyone that courage doesn't require a corner office or seven-figure bank account. "Dignity has no language barrier," became Ayako's motto, printed on business cards and conference room walls. "Respect is the foundation of business," appeared in partnership agreements worldwide. Their story spread because it touched something universal, the recognition that basic human decency transcends every barrier we construct. In a world celebrating the loud and powerful, sometimes the most important voices come from the quietest corners. That elegant hotel dining room had witnessed more than a business deal. It had seen proof that true strength lies not in dominating others, but in having the courage to stand up for what's right, regardless of the cost. Respect truly has no barriers.